Hello and welcome back for another Bones V Kickstarter review here on the Goblin's Grotto channel. This is the first you're seeing of this series. I'm reviewing the near entirety of the Bones V Kickstarter lineup, so be sure to also check out my review of the core set, the Dungeon Dwellers expansion, the Daimyo expansion, and the Dark Depths expansion by visiting the playlist that's showing up in the right hand corner or checking out my channel. The link's in the description. I may sound like a broken record, but I must insist, if you're interested in acquiring anything you see here today or any other part of this series, do not wait. 5.5 Pledge Manager is closing soon and supplies are limited. Scan the QR code or visit reapermini.com or pm.reapermini.com for more info and a chance to get all of these minis ahead of retail. Today's review will focus on the Greek Odyssey expansion. This expansion cost $50 and actually had the least offerings of any of the other expansions I acquired, and thus the highest cost per mini. Not that these aren't still saving you at retail, but is it worth the $50? Well, we'll find out. This collection is themed around Greek mythology. However, a lot of these minis, as we might see, could have some use cases outside of that arena. Wasting no time, let's jump right into the minis. Here we have a couple of columns, one of Zeus, one of Hera. If your game has Greek gods in its setting, these would be fairly useful little terrain pieces or living columns. Otherwise, they could be stand-ins for a number of interesting figures. I don't really have too much to say of these. The bases are nice and, well, they're neat terrain pieces and all, but unless one of them comes to life to tell your young adventurers how to find where they belong or something, well, I don't really see myself worrying too much about these figures. Probably wouldn't even paint them. They're basically already the color they need to be. I wouldn't say characters are the focus of this set, but we do have a few of them. First, we have an Argonaut, aka Greek warrior. Here they are next to an older Reaper model with a similar theme. This new one has a very nice design of a wolf next to a sunburst or a flower or something on the shield, and it's in a much more defensive stance than its older counterpart. And comparing these figures, I believe you can see the upgrade in the material, sharpness, quality. It's just overall a better made figure, in my opinion. Both are still great, though. Here we have a Greek-styled archer. She's giving Artemis. She's giving Athena. I like that she's using a hip quiver. It's hot button debate amongst archery enthusiasts and history buffs, but generally it's thought that the hip quiver is better for actual combat and is easier to draw from. Which is not to say that people don't or didn't prefer the shoulder sling, but it does have certain drawbacks that you can go find debate about online if you so choose. This mage would fit well within a temple of Ioun for use in a more traditional D&D setting. I recall Reaper had initially given this guy a name, one of a famous Greek philosopher, but changed it to a generic mage later on in the campaign. But probably fits better anyway, as I don't believe any Greek philosophers spent their time casting spells, running around with big old owl-headed staffs. I could be wrong, though. He but the gliding gladiator, Hercules, who would actually be called Heracles by the ancient Greeks anyway. Hercules is his Roman name, which makes the whole movie a little weird since it's Zeus and all. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It seems like this rough, bearded demigod has already slain the Nemean Lion and slung it over his back, where he's stashed a bow and arrow set. There's really some nice etching at the bottom of his robe, and the face of this championship belt there. Outside of the Greek Odyssey theme, this guy could make a nice, cultured barbarian character. Not to be outdone, we have the enchantress and minor goddess in her own right, Circe. She's depicted here with a staff and a dish, likely containing one of her famous potions, which she would use to lure and enchant men into her mansion, wherein she would transform them into animals, mostly turning the men into pigs, and here's a couple of them now. Yes, these two boar are both quite cute and would make great familiars or animal companions for D&D, but remember that these are essentially folks forcibly polymorphed into, well, boar. That's a bit less cute, maybe a bit more dark. It would have been nice to have received a few more of these Greek characters, but this is all we got. In terms of humanish characters, anyway. It seems like you couldn't swing a dead lion by the tail without hitting at least one harpy in any Greek mythological story. Well, in this Odyssey, we ended up getting two. Harpies are one of those common Greek mythological monsters that seem to show up in nearly every. These do have a bit of clothing and other small details that hint at their Greek origins, but there's really nothing that ties them down to it. You could really use these in any game, wherever appropriate. The sculpts are nice. This flailing one is nice, even though the skull at the base may be a little large, but I think the other one is more interesting. It has a lot of little bags around its waist. Perhaps they just took it off their latest victim, or maybe this indicates that they could be traded, negotiated with, because they do carry things on their person. I guess there'd only be one way to find out. Well, they're not quite a flock, but it's a good pair. Here's some of those non-human characters that I alluded to earlier. First, a fawn. She looks like she'd make a good monk character. She seems to be carrying a wrapped staff of some kind. This one has some of that Greek style armor, but it's nothing that couldn't blend into D&D's Forgotten Realms or other campaigns. I think good fawn or satyr minis can be hard to come by, at least one's not all playing the lute. So I could see this figure being useful for Greek Odyssey as much as for a trip to the Feywild. Same goes for this satyr mini, which would be the same species as fawn, even though for whatever reason they gave them different names. Whatever. It has some really tall, impressive horns, and this one carries a proper blade and is a little more armored. I really like the little sigils on the back plate and the little chest plate there. And the roughly hewn leather satchel that it has on its back. Looks like it's made from some kind of furs. I'll definitely be defaulting to these two if I am in need of a satyr or a fawn in any of my games. I'm really impressed with this centaur. It's got lots of etched armor plates and weapons. The pose is really dynamic. Looks like it's taking a swipe at somebody to his side. But he may be difficult to swing as a PC character if you're limiting your players by the 5e medium-sized centaur stats. He's pretty big. Here he is by another of Reaper's centaur casts in their classic Bones material. You can see the great upgrade this Bones Black is to that. You can also see that this is a bit bigger, a bit more larger size. But hey, you know, there are no rules, only guidelines. If you want to play as a large-sized character and your DM allows it, hey, cool beans. Just, you know, be wary of ladders. We get a few different beasts, animals in this set. Here we have the Leucrotta, which has wildly different depictions across a variety of cultures, but is basically a dog, wolf thing, sometimes with antlers. I don't know, mythology is weird. This figure happens to be a recast of an older Reaper model that they refer to as a Badger Wolf, which, I mean, sure, I guess. It kinda, yeah. I don't think even the people who came up with these really knew what they were going for, so, go nuts, I guess. We also have this lion. More specifically, this is supposed to be the Nemean Lion. The Nemean Lion was famously slain by Heracles, who was apparently the only guy for the job, as the lion had impervious golden fur and armor-splitting claws. Smitty may be a bit big to sub as a typical male lion, but you could if you really wanted. Again, there's no rules, only guidelines. Alrighty, now we're talking. We've come to some of the classic foes of Greek mythology, both of which could be used as more generic enemies if you so chose. Avert your eyes, or don't, is Medusa. Medusa, that's who it is. Reaper has gone with the snake body archer depiction here. Her snake half is coiled over this broken column and ends in a rattle. Rattlesnakes are actually only native to the Americas, but this Gorgon can accessorize however she wants, I guess. There are so many scales here. This texture is made for a dry brush. The human half isn't without good detail either. We have the return of the hip quiver, although I don't know if snakes have hips, even if they have an upper human body. Either way, it's a good placement because her head atop her shoulders is a mat of snakes. Probably make drawing from the back pretty difficult. Unless the snakes helped. Oh, with her petrifying glare and her crushing tail and her sharp shooting, she made quite the deadly boss encounter, despite not even being that large of a mini. You know who is large, though? Large and in charge. The Minotaur. No, this is not a Minotaur mini, this is the Minotaur. You can see it next to one of Reaper's other older Minotaur models. This one is a big boy. He has the stride like he's stepping down the stairs to demolish whoever's trespassing in his labyrinth. It's very intimidating, but unfortunately it angles the mini so that it looks a little toppled over on the actual table. I love the skulls on the chain and the bell dangling from his belt. I guess he's not really worried about letting you know that he's coming. As someone who has a sizable Minotaur collection and has a strange affinity for these figures, with some of the first minis I ever painted being Minotaurs, check out the video in the corner to see some of them, I can confidently say that this is now the best Minotaur miniature that I own. But we can't get lost in the labyrinth just yet. There's still a lot more to see. Like this bronze golem. This large, imposing construct is one of the more heavily detailed and thematic figures of its type that I've seen. The armor is immaculately detailed. I particularly like the little wreath textures on the helmet. Seems to be stomping across this very nicely textured base that reminds me of some kind of plaza or intricate street fair. The ram head bracers are maybe my favorite element, though. They really let you know that this guy can pack a punch. And considering this thing is meant to be made of a metal, I imagine that punch would not be one many folks could just walk away from either. That said, you don't actually have to paint this thing to be a metal construct. The body that is visible, the bit of face, the hands, and the feet, could be painted like some other large humanoid. But for me, the metal construct approach will do just fine. He's very Greco-Roman themed, but that won't stop me from using this in games outside of that setting. It's just too cool. Next, we have a pair of dueling aerial combatants, a Pegasus and a Griffin. These are some of the better sculpts for these creatures that I've seen. They have these very large wingspans and dynamic poses. Too often with Pegasi, they're just trotting along or standing still, their wings folded up or just comically spread. No. This thing is ready to hoof kick you right into Tartarus. The Griffin is more claw and beak. It doesn't have the head of an eagle, as can be so often depicted, but instead goes for the more subtle approach, with a beak at the tip of its horse snout and claws in the place of its front hooves, which are attached to legs more befitting of a bird of prey. These would make for great encounters, or if your party can manage it, some top tier mounts. Who's a good boy? They are. Yes, it's Cerberus, or a Cerberus anyway. The three-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld. They got quite a vicious bite. 3 of them, in fact. I haven't actually glued this to its base so you can see what that looks like. The figure stands pretty well without it anyway. The middle head is the best looking in my opinion, but they're all great. The pose is a bit low for me. I wish he was raised up maybe a centimeter or so, but it's fine. Pretty good introduction into the larger scale minis of this set, that's for sure. Speaking of raising up, we have the tallest mini of the set. Just barely. The Cloud Giantess. She pairs well with the Storm Giant add-on, which we'll be looking at in a future video, link once it's available. This leg up pose on this broken column gives it a little bit of height and a certain heroic stature. All the armor, what little there is also very intricately detailed. The new Bones material really does a much better job of these fine elements than the older stuff. I mean, look at this little club here. It's got another little statue buried within it. I just don't see that kind of stuff on the older Bones classics. Along with all this detail, I think this mini will be great for anyone wanting to practice flesh tones, especially those of a non-typical human variety, as well, there's a lot of leg and face and stuff to work with. Same goes for this next guy. Yeah, he may be slightly shorter, but this Cyclops may well be the biggest head of this set for me. And I did not think that before seeing it in person. So he's really big, definitely a huge size monster. It comes with this little necklace, which you can just let dangle around his neck, like this. And he has this massive club, which seems to be a bit of column piece chained to a reinforced tree branch. Cyclops are meant to be master craftsmen, and this sure is crafty, I could say. I didn't glue the hand in because 1, it's friction locked just fine, and 2, this thing comes with an alternate hand. As you can see, this one is holding a sheep. Perhaps he's tending to him, and this is a huge misunderstanding, but it seems more like he's stealing them and making clothes out of them, as evidenced by the belt full of sheep pelts. Being able to swap between hands really increases this figure's relative versatility. Maybe the encounter starts with him unarmed, just holding the poor sheep hostage, but as your players engage, he drops it and acquires his club, making the encounter that much more challenging. Yeah, hands down, this is my favorite mini of the set, and will basically be my go-to Cyclops. Oh, as often as my party encounters a Cyclops. With that, we've come to the premier figure of the set. You've seen it slithering in the background, prepare to face the Hydra. Oh, that's just a bit smaller than I expected. But okay. Yeah, so the Hydra is a bit smaller than some of the other minis in this collection, and it's probably more in line with the 5e Hydra size than the Mythic Scale one, but it still would have been kind of cool to see if it was a bit bigger. The sculpt is great, though. It's resting on this pile of rubble, including a few more of those Golem pieces. Each of the 5 heads has a slightly different look or personality. The pose is great, too. It seems to be prepared for an attack in virtually all directions, as you'd expect from a creature with this many heads. This is yet another great dry brushing opportunity, as the scales that cover this creature are very nicely formed and stick out quite a bit. I don't actually remember assembling this. I think I may have glued the twin heads on, but that's it. They may have actually done that for me, and I just don't remember. It's been a while. Really, this figure is basically all one piece, which means easy assembly and virtually no mold lines. Hats off to the designer for this one. I get why it's the size it is. I reckon that will be a lot of people's little gripes about this one, but honestly, the quality makes up for it. And, unless you're Heracles or some other demigod, you probably don't need to be fighting the bigger one anyway. And with that, we're done. Yeah, a lot less of a roster for this set. After averaging all my scores, this set earned an even 10.5 out of 12 for me. I would round this up to 11, but I could stand half a slice. I don't think this is quite as great value as the Dark Depths expansion, though I do recognize that this set probably has more versatile figures in most fantasy settings than the underwater theme to that previous set. At any rate, I would definitely recommend picking up these minis while available. What did you like along the way? Do you have a favorite figure? Let me know your answers in the comments below. And if you feel like acquiring any of these figures, remember to check out the 5.5 Pledge Manager while you still can. Time and supplies are running out. That's going to be it for this video. Stay tuned for the last 2 expansions before we move into the wealth of add-ons. If you enjoyed this content, consider leaving a like. It really helps out the channel and lets me know that I helped entertain someone out there. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Let's go paint some minis.